Okay.
Okay, it's live on YouTube now.
Okay, so we'll begin. Good afternoon, everybody. I hope everyone's well, and I hope that you have some chocolate with you and are ready to take a tour through the world of Judaism and chocolate. Just a precursor to what I want to say today. There's a couple of reasons why I wanted to talk about this. One is the fact that much of the history of Judaism and chocolate deals with Sephardic history. And for the most part, most Jews, when they learn Jewish history, they really spend the majority of their time learning about Ashkenazic or Eastern European history, because so many Jews have had relatives who have come from Eastern European origins, and not nearly as many have come from Sephardic origins. So I wanted to spend some time teaching you a little bit about Sephardic Judaism, more Middle Eastern Judaism, or what they call Oriental Judaism. And the other reason why I wanted to talk about Judaism and chocolate is because there's such a unique intertwine between Judaism, the Jewish people, Jewish history, and the history of chocolate. I actually started thinking about this topic a long time ago. And the reason I started thinking about the topic was because there was a time, actually a very long time in my life, that I was not able to eat chocolate. I was forbidden from eating chocolate because chocolate gave me migraines. And it was actually during this period, and I love chocolate. I mean, like so many people in the world today, for some people, not eating chocolate is absolutely unthinkable. And it was for me for a long time, because I spent a good over 30 years not being able to eat chocolate, not being able to touch chocolate. In fact, even the scent of chocolate gave me migraines. And I thought, well, the pull of eating chocolate was much greater than the pain of the migraine, and I quickly changed my mind about that. So I stayed away from chocolate, and you know, it's come about where there's some new medications, and I'm able to eat chocolate again. But while I was not able to eat chocolate, I did some studying about chocolate. I wanted to learn about chocolate. It was sort of self-serving. I was trying to figure out for myself what it was about chocolate that gave me migraines. But it led me to a number of sources that connected Judaism and chocolate. And there's a wonderful book that's out called Along the Chocolate Trail, which I found actually after I did a fair amount of my research, and which really summarizes a lot of what I learned. But if you pick up a piece of chocolate, you actually partake in an expedition into Jewish and religious history. And today, what we're going to try to do is we're going to try to highlight the unique connections to chocolate against a historical backdrop of religious engagement with chocolate. We're going to attempt to unscramble the mystery of Jews, religion, and chocolate along the trail of economic development spanning a number of cultures, countries, centuries, continents, and convictions. The chocolate journey layers curiosity and gratitude and pleasure and opportunity and success onto an underside of disdain and critique and abuse and persecution. It embraces marginalized groups like Quakers and Jews, and also notes individuals who came to be known as chocolate uncles. As chocolate is malleable, so too does our story today reflect the resourcefulness and the resilience of chocolate lovers. Chocolate is an immigrant food. The ultimate comfort food brings people together all the time. The chocolate path parallels the highways of Jewish history, particularly that of the Sephardim, the Jews of Iberian descent, and other Jewish migrations, as in the case of some pretty famous chocolatiers like Eliyahu Fromenchenko of Elite Chocolates in Israel. He came from Eastern Europe and went to Israel. Katrina Chaplinsky, who came from Argentina and went to Israel. Stephen Klein of Barton's, who went from Vienna to New York. And Oded Brenner of Max Brenner Chocolates, who actually went from Tel Aviv to New York. And if you've been down Fifth Avenue, you know Max Brenner Chocolates is one of the premier chocolate stores that is open in New York today. It builds on a deep pre-Columbian tradition and intersects and twists and turns with Catholic and Quaker chocolate encounters. Jews jump into chocolate early in some places, like New Spain, and in significant Jewish centers like Amsterdam and New York and Newport, as great chocolate entrepreneurs, Chilean and others in New Spain, the Gomez family and the Aaron Lopez family in North America, and as experts in Amsterdam and Martinique and Bayonne, New Jersey. This new world product of chocolate blazed a new world of commerce, of appetite, and opportunity for Jews as well as for others. Jews and Christians meet on this chocolate journey. Faith traditions share chocolate consumption. They share chocolate ritual, and they share chocolate business interests. Jews and Christians displayed a fascination with the cacao trade, arriving at it from different perspectives and beliefs. Struggles around propriety and constraints and enjoyment could be seen in both Judaism and in Christianity. And while there have been and still are great abuses, which we'll talk about a little bit later, related to chocolate, from the Spanish Inquisition to the Holocaust, from Bayonne to West Africa, this path also was nurtured and sustained. And when we consider the visionary, ambitious, and versatile entrepreneurs who made a life of chocolate, the British Quaker companies and Milton Hershey and Camille Bloch, and the Holocaust controversies in Switzerland, the unique business of Barton's, we also see that they contributed greatly to the lives of others. From chocolate use in religious settings, we learn food wisdoms about chocolate eating as a potentially sacred endeavor. Religious life has been enchanted by chocolate. Chocolate has been embraced by religion. A challenge remains to develop a chocolate culture of ideals expressing commitments that are grounded in faith values. And again, we're going to discuss the ethics of chocolate a little bit later today. So the chocolate that we love begins with trees. The term used during the multi-stage process of deriving chocolate from these trees varies. Some use cacao and cocoa interchangeably. Others define cacao and cocoa very differently. In that view, it might help you to note that the transition from wet plant to dry product, cacao refers to the tree. It refers to the fruit pod that grows on the tree, and it refers to the seeds that nest inside the pod. The second term, cocoa, applies after the fermentation stage as a term for the bean and the resulting semi-finished powder and the cocoa butter. But in either usage, chocolate comes to mean the processed product finished for eating or for drinking or for further use in another product, likely with sugar added in. The trailhead for this chocolate passion lies at the crossroads of the age of exploration and discovery of the New World at the end of the 15th century. Jews of that time inherited the then radical concept of around the world from the 4th century text, the earth is made as a ball. And that came from what we call today the Jerusalem Talmud. Medieval Jewish scientists advanced numerous innovations related to the circumnavigation that furthered New World discoveries. Explorers like Christopher Columbus and Vasco da Gama consulted with Abraham ben Samuel Zacuto regarding westward travel to the Near East. Zacuto plotted Columbus's route. Just as Columbus's voyage began, Zacuto faced charges from the Spanish Inquisition, the crusade against heretics by the Roman Catholic Church, and he fled to Portugal, where he devised an improvised astrolabe. This device, used to fix location in relation to the sun, the moon, and the stars, became the standard in subsequent exploits by colonialist adventurers. These and other advances by Iberian Jews set the backstory for the discovery of the New World's chocolate resources. Iberian Jews may have been among the first Europeans to see cacao in the New World, especially if Columbus was Jewish or partially Jewish, as many believe. Members of his first crew were born Jewish or descended from Jews. The word conversos, a term usually used for Jews who converted to Christianity and or descended from converted Jews, such as Alonso de la Calle, a sailor, Rodrigo Sanchez of Segovia, a controller, and others, crewed the first voyage of 1492. Luis de Torres was baptized just in time to act as Columbus's interpreter. Their voyage was supported by a vastly wealthy converso named Luis del Santangel, Chancellor of the King's household, Controller General of Aragon, who argued in favor of the proposed voyage to Ferdinand and Isabella. Santangel used his own funds actually to help underwrite this and other expeditions. All of these contributed to the discovery of the cacao bean laden canoe during Columbus's fourth voyage in 1502 in the Bay of Honduras, as reported by Columbus's son Ferdinand. He said many of the almonds, which of course were cacao beans, which the Indians of New Spain used as currency, and these the Indians in the canoe valued greatly. For I noticed that when they were brought aboard with other goods, some fell to the floor, and the Indians scurried to stoop and pick them up as if they had lost something of great value. Now, let me give you just a few facts about religion and chocolate. First, there are some people who think that chocolate was brought first by Jews to France. Secondly, in 1602, the victory of the citizens of Geneva, Switzerland, over the Duke of Savoy's attempt to destroy is commemorated each December with soup pots that are made from chocolate. Third, the Bishop of Chiapas, Mexico, was poisoned because he prohibited local women from drinking chocolate during Mass. Fourth, North American Jewish and Quaker colonial traders were involved in the chocolate trade. Fifth, Junipero Serra depended on chocolate for his work in building missions in California in the 18th century. Six, Cistercian monks in Poblet, Spain, designated a special chocolate room where they lived. Seventh, at age 16, Austrian Jewish confectioner Franz Sacher created the now famous Sachertorte. 8, chocolate was first introduced to the Spanish court of Prince Philip by Dominicans. 9th, Inquisition jails of New Spain allowed the drinking of chocolate by prisoners. And 10, since Europeans first encountered chocolate, Jews and clerics from that time forward have been on what we call the chocolate trail. As I continued to research Jews and chocolate, I began to consider the connection between chocolate and Jews in France. I realized that it made sense. Jews exiled from Spain in 1492 and then from Portugal in 1496 engaged in international trade as they continued their linkages to each other through birth, business, or family bonds. Over the years, since its discovery by Europeans in 1502 in the New World and its import to Spain in approximately 1520, chocolate developed into a colonial extract industry. Jews still living in Spain or with family contacts in Spain would have easily learned about chocolate, even if the Spanish throne sought to maintain a monopoly over it. With a little more detective work on my part, it became clear that in their relocations from Spain and Portugal, these Jews played a critical, if not unique part in the cacao business. In addition to Catholic clerics, Jews who converted to Christianity or were descended of converted Jews, conversos, diffused different ways of Spanish chocolate making across Europe with specialty workshops in Bayonne, Amsterdam, and other European cities. For instance, the first coffee house in England, the Angle, which served hot chocolate as later coffee houses did, was opened by a converso Jew named Jacob in Oxford in 1650. At the time of the readmission of Jews to England, some sources refer to him as Circus Jobson, a Jew. The Grand Cafe on High Street memorializes that site today. In addition to that, chocolate making became a Dutch Jewish specialty, especially after the rise of the cocoa trade with Curacao in the 1650s. Jews were considered excellent chocolate makers in what was called another typical Jewish Amsterdam industry. When appointed as the Spanish ambassador to The Hague in 1655, Don Esteban Gamarra fretted that he would not be able to access his customary daily chocolate in this strange environment. To assuage his fear, his staff informed him that the best chocolatiers, including a man named Panchico, who flavored his chocolate with vanilla, were the Jews of Amsterdam. Not only that, but in 1663, Emmanuel Suarez de Reinero, a converso, received the first permit to fabricate chocolate in the province of Brabant. The first personal rabbinic testimony of chocolate consumption comes from the mid-18th century in the diaries of Rabbi Chaim Yosef David Azulai. He lived from 1724 to 1806, commonly known as Hida. He documented widespread chocolate drinking among the Jews of Europe of his day. Of Sephardic descent, Hida was born and educated in Jerusalem. He published over 60 works of Jewish law and prayers, plus his travel diaries. Some consider him to be the greatest Sephardic scholar since Joseph Caro, the author of the 16th century Jewish code called the Shulchan Aruch. Due to his erudition, Hida was chosen to be a messenger from Israel to the European Jewish communities. His diaries mention chocolate at least 10 times between 1755 and 1778. On his travels, he drank chocolate, he ate chocolate, and was gifted chocolate. His hosts entertained him with chocolate in Italy and in France and the Netherlands. And during a harrowing journey in a snowstorm from Cuneo, Italy to Nice, France, he confessed that he resorted to eating some raw chocolate, and I ate about a liter. In Amsterdam, chocolate was served with sweets, following a bris in 1777. Following prayers in Montpellier, France, he drank chocolate with the synagogue's major benefactor and others. All over Europe, these communities were benefiting from chocolate, as was Rabbi Azulai. By the 1630s, there was approximately 60 Jewish, probably converso families living in Bayonne, France, which had formerly admitted small numbers of conversos. Outwardly, they lived as Christians. However, since the Inquisition was not strong in France, they slowly became more public about their secret Judaism. And in 1654, the Jewish community sought assistance from the parish priest from the suburb of Saint-Esprit to purchase a cemetery plot, which was granted. He also allowed Jewish mourning and ritual practices. Until 1668, Jewish deaths were recorded in the register of Christian burials. Bayonne, France Jews like Émile Pierre, Alvaro Luis, Aaron Coles were crucial leaders in the contraband trade with Spain, including the business of exporting and re-exporting and smuggling of cacao. Spain was the primary European market for chocolate at the beginning of the 17th century. Bayonne's extremely valuable port enabled traders to bypass the Spanish embargoes of 1621, creating lucrative economic traffic between Spain's Castile region and other Jewish communities, particularly Amsterdam. Aaron Coles opened a Bayonne office to monitor the market between Spain, Amsterdam, Caracas, and Spain, particularly shipping Caracas cacao between Amsterdam and Spain. In just a 6-month period, from 1621 to 1622, at least 30 Dutch vessels unloaded goods in Bayonne's port for secret transport to Madrid by mule train through the mountain passes. Given this tremendously profitable trade through Bayonne, in which Jews played a key role, merchants of Amsterdam petitioned to open a Dutch consul office in Bayonne in 1624. These ties between the Bayonne Jewish merchants and the Amsterdam Jewish community furthered the commerce of cacao. Because of this chocolate trade, and because of local Jewish chocolate makers, Bayonne became known as the Chocolate Center. In September 1725, it was reported that Bayonne chocolate was sold in marble-sized balls prepared on a stone, or is known in the New World emetate. With time, the reputation of Bayonne chocolate became so well established that dealers in Carcassonne, a fortified town in the southwest region of France, a significant distance in those days, preferred chocolate primarily from the Bayonne area. Bayonne chocolate became identified with specialized preparation and ingredients known as La Bayonnaise. By 1856, Bayonne had 33 chocolate factories, several of them using steam-powered machinery. This supremacy of Bayonne may be seen in a review published at the end of the 18th century about the chocolate made in a Paris shop. He employs Spanish, Piedmontese, and Italian methods, as through Madrid, Florence, Genoa, and Turin were teamed up in his boutique and were vying with Bayonne for the supreme honor. Instead, from Inquisition records, we learn about several conversos on the chocolate trail in New Spain. In 1641, Manuel Alvarez de Arellano imported goods from Seville and distributed them throughout New Spain. The same year, he left for Spain with Mexican chocolate and other items, but he was arrested by the Inquisition officials in 1642 and sent to Mexico for trial. Luis Nunez, a Portuguese converso and cacao retail merchant in New Spain, was arrested in June of 1642, shortly after he arrived. A vendor of cocoa beans, he was sentenced to reconciliation with the Catholic Church and a life imprisonment at the age of 30. Pedro de Campos became a successful cacao merchant in the Campeche by the 1640s. In 1624, Francisco Lopez de Fonseca, who spent his childhood in Portugal and Spain, sailed to Cartagena at age 16 to help his uncle in his general store, and then traveled to Venezuela, where he purchased a shipment of cacao and sailed for New Spain. Another Jewish cacao merchant was Duarte Castano, operating out of Caracas, exchanged cacao for silver and products desired in Venezuela. During one expedition to Veracruz in 1645, he carried 25 fengas, a dry measure of about half a bushel, belonging to Rabbi Benito Enriquez, 8 fanegas sent by Pedro de Campos, as well as his own cargo of 100 fanegas, all on consignment of converso Antonio Melendez Chilion. Francisco Franco de Morea imported and distributed cacao from Venezuela. Cacao had made him extremely wealthy. After his arrest, when the Inquisition officials inventoried his home, they found 8,486 Mexican silver pesos, 349 gold Spanish doubloons, trunks of silver, jewelry, tableware, gold, and pearls. The Inquisition deported him to Cadiz, Spain, and confiscated all the wealth he had amassed to give to his children. If you look further into Inquisition reports about people like Mendez Chilion, you readily notice that Jews not only took an active role in the cacao trade in the New World, but they also secreted it into their undercover Jewish ritual life. Mexican crypto Jews used chocolate for welcoming Shabbat because wine was scarce in New Spain. For Jews attempting to follow Jewish dietary laws, the parve nature of local chocolate drink prepared without milk lent itself to the separation of milk and meat. It could be enjoyed with a milk meal or a meat meal. Chocolate seeped into important Jewish customs and celebratory meals for holidays and life cycle events. Beatriz Enriquez and her sister would not even drink their daily chocolate until they had prayed each morning. The same Beatriz recalled the following recalled that following the private negotiations for an engagement, the entire family gathered together to celebrate with chocolate drinking. This chocolate was extended to sad times as well. Holding vigil for the dying Dona Blanca Mendez de Rivera, her daughters and granddaughters spent a day in reflection and prayer, fortified by a special meal of chocolate and pickled fish, brought from Veracruz by a merchant, Matthias Rodriguez de Oliveira. As Margarita recalled for the Inquisition, chocolate smoothed life outside the Inquisition jails as well. Diego Carrera and his wife, Catalina de Rivera, who knew well of Mexico's crypto Jews and could identify them, owned a small stall selling chocolate in the Cathedral Plaza. When the Inquisition arrested Blanca Mendez de Rivera and her daughters in 1642 to get their testimony, the Enriquez woman called up Carrera, hoping to enlist his help in preventing his wife, her sisters, and their mother from selling them out. Carrera testified that Juana Enriquez had given him a gift of 6 libras, pounds of chocolate. Another woman, also worried about being reported to the Inquisition by Correa's wife, gave him a little chocolate and a loaf of sugar. Chocolate continued to be important even after the Inquisition sentenced Judaizers to return to Spain and to be dealt with by the Inquisition there. When Simon Vélez Sevilla emerged from the penitential cells in 1649, they were commanded by the Inquisition to leave Mexico City immediately. They departed for Seville with none else but a cargo of chocolate, 5,000 pesos, jewelry, and silver. I'd like to change directions for the moment. If you were to go to Belgium at this time of year, as you wandered in the cities and towns, you'd be approached by a group of individuals shaking cups with coins clinking inside the cups. If you were perplexed by what was happening and you inquired at, say, the tourist office the next day, the clerk would probably patiently explain to you that you arrived during the Feast of St. Nicholas, when college students customarily roam the streets begging for gifts to buy beer to observe the holiday. If you were to go to Belgium at this time of year, you would notice in both the best and the junkiest of chocolate shops, chocolate molded in the shape of tall, lanky St. Nicholas in his episcopal robes. That would make sense. We know that St. Nicholas provides the prototype, of course, for Santa Claus. To find either one in chocolate probably wouldn't surprise you. I'm sure that many of you have seen and eaten your share of chocolate Santas over the years. But it's here at this point that I begin to wonder about these coins in the cups at this time of year and how they might possibly relate to Hanukkah coins, as Hanukkah and Christmas usually coincide in December. And most importantly, what about the gold-covered chocolate for Hanukkah known as Geld, the Yiddish word for money? As I began to research into the literature about Hanukkah's connection with coins, I found numerous associations. Hanukkah recalls the victory of the ancient Maccabees over the Syrian Hellenists and the renewed access by the Jews to their ancient temple in Jerusalem after its desecration. The Geld of Hanukkah recalls the booty, including coins, that the Maccabee victors distributed to the Jewish widows and soldiers and orphans, possibly at the first celebration of the rededication of the Jerusalem temple. In ancient Israel, striking, minting, and distributing coins expressed Hanukkah's message of freedom. The Maccabees' descendants known as the Hashmonaim, and who ruled Judea, started to strike coins. The first book of the Maccabees records Syria's king, Antiochus VII, saying to Simon Maccabee, "I turn over to you the right to make your own stamp for coinage for your country." Unfortunately, very few Jewish coins were produced between the time the Romans destroyed the Second Temple in 70 CE and the establishment of the modern state of Israel in 1948. Since 1958, Israel has minted commemorative Hanukkah medals, reforging this connection of coinage, freedom, and the holiday. Most appropriately, because Hanukkah celebrates political independence and religious freedom. Money and Hanukkah go way back in other ways as well, including the very observance of the holiday. As early as the 6th century, the legal text known as the Talmud taught that the poor must celebrate Hanukkah even if they had to wander door to door to beg for the money to pay for lighting materials, which in those days were probably oil, and clay lamps, and wicks. Later, in the Sephardi and Oriental, following the customs of the Jews of North Africa and the Middle East, Jewish communities, people walk through their neighborhoods, burning special grasses to ward off the evil eye in exchange for gifts of money at the Hanukkah season. Yemenite Jewish children were given coins to purchase sugar and red food dye to make special Hanukkah wine. With time, additional customs evolved relating to giving coins at Hanukkah. The Hebrew word Hanukkah, which refers to the rededication of the Jerusalem temple after the Syrian Hellenists had desecrated it, came to be associated with the Hebrew word for education, chinuch. The gelt of money for Hanukkah supported Jewish learning. In the days of the Hasidic leader, the Baal Shem Tov, who lived from 1698 to 1760, rabbis often traveled to distant villages to give instruction to impoverished or illiterate Jews, generally refusing any kind of payment. However, at Hanukkah time, the instructors accepted coins and food as tokens of gratitude. Hanukkah gelt signified appreciative, though modest, compensation for dedication to Jewish education. And in addition, coins came to be an expected part of the Hanukkah festivities in the home. One such custom involved giving gelt on each night of Hanukkah, except for Friday evening, Shabbat, when the use of money was prohibited. The normative legal code, the 16th century Shulchan Aruch, which I spoke about before by Joseph Caro, stipulated that the light shed by the Hanukkah candles may not be used for benefit, not even for counting money. It therefore became customary to play games, some of them using money while the candles burned. Shulchan Aruch, chapter 46, gives us that idea. In dreidel, the popular children's game of Hanukkah, using a spinning top, the winner is also sometimes paid in coins. So with so many ties between coins and Hanukkah, it would not be surprising to find chocolate in the mix. After all, there was an early fundamental joining of money and chocolate. Beans served as currency for the pre-Columbian people. Columbus and his crew soon learned that these mysterious-looking almonds they first saw at the bottom of a canoe were used by the indigenous people of the Americas as coinage. For example, in 1513, Hernando de Ovidia y Valdez paid 100 cocoa beans to purchase a slave. So values were cocoa beans that counterfeiters were known to fill empty shells with clay or earth. And in the New World, cocoa was gelt, and it grew on trees. Why chocolate coins, though? Well, opinions differ, however, as to how chocolate came to be associated with coins for Hanukkah. One theory says that 18th and 19th century Jews became prominent in European chocolate making and began the Hanukkah chocolate coin custom. That's one theory. Another theory says that with increased purchasing capacity in the American Jewish community in the 1920s, Loft began producing Hanukkah chocolate, or gelt, may have its roots in a Polish custom that informed Israel's elites' chocolate production of chocolate coins. Certainly, gold-foiled chocolate coins unfailingly appear every December in many commercial and residential Hanukkah displays. My mother actually used to put bags of chocolate Hanukkah gelt in large plastic dreidels. Some people scatter Hanukkah gelt, the gold coins, on the holiday table. President George W. Bush's White House chief of staff, Joshua Bolton, shared chocolate gelt at senior staff meetings every December of Bush's presidency. You can do an online research project that will yield comparisons of quality and cost of chocolate Hanukkah gelt. And there's actually a rap song that lauds Hanukkah gelt as well. As you delve further into the themes of Jews and chocolate, you begin to find various stories about the potency of 20th century wartime chocolate for refugees, for survivors, and immigrants. The accounts spanned from deprivation to comfort, from degradation to rescue, from despicable to artful, from Europe to America. For some, chocolate soothed and fortified refugee and immigrant passages and evoked sweet opportunities, loving reunions, renewal, and hope. For others, chocolate making skills meant nothing short of survival. Chocolate companies launched some chocolate makers into leadership of their wartime Jewish communities and beyond. Jewish immigrants have a long history of succeeding in the chocolate and candy business in the United States, dating back to the late 1800s. Immigrant Louis Oster developed the chocolate egg cream in his candy store in New York's Lower East Side in 1890. He made the drink using his secret recipe, including a chocolate sauce that he himself developed, and he sold it for 3 cents a glass, averaging somewhere around 3,000 sales on any given summer day. Ultimately, he opened 4 additional locations, and until his business closed down in the 1960s. In 1895, Herman and Ida Fox, also New Yorkers, developed Fox's You Bet chocolate syrup in Brooklyn, offering a kosher for Passover version as well. The Fox family-owned company is still located right there in the original factory in Brooklyn. In New York City in 1896, Leo Hirschfield started a small candy shop, having learned the confectionery business in Austria from his family. His special taffy-esque formula of chocolate Tootsie Rolls, named for his daughter, avoided the cost of actual chocolate by using cocoa powder instead. This, plus the individual wrappers, made them easily portable, even in the summer. David Goldenberg immigrated to Philadelphia from Romania in the 1880s at the age of 18. He was the youngest of 7 children. He changed his name on the boat having heard that it would be preferable to be a Goldenberg than to be a seltzer. He developed a chocolate ration bar for the army using molasses and peanuts as a substitute for more expensive almonds. This candy bar came to be known as Peanut Chews. His children, Sylvie and Harry, introduced the individually wrapped Peanut Chews for retail in 1921, and the brand was sold to Just Born in 2003. Yet another immigrant candy story. They produced the popular Peeps for Easter. While sweets and chocolate shops were opening, and in some cases thriving in the United States, wartime Europe cast some darkness over chocolate. European Jewish businesses, including a number of Jewish chocolate enterprises, were forced to shut down during the Nazi period of World War II. Nestle's chocolate subsidiary, Maggie, employed thousands of war prisoners and Jewish slave owners in its factory in Germany near the Swiss border. As recently as 1997, it refused to open its Nazi-era records. Nazis used chocolate bars to lure Jews onto cattle car trains to concentration camps. German saboteurs designed a chocolate-covered, sleek steel bomb intended to explode 7 seconds after breaking off a piece. Other Nazi schemes sought to poison Allied officers through chocolate. While its dark side is very dark indeed, chocolate also played a positive role in World War II, sparking innovation, heroism, and the development of survival skills for citizens, the military, and business. Chocolate companies accommodated restrictive food supplies and severe rationing of the period by modifying their products. For example, to make up for the shortage of cocoa in Italy in the 1940s, Pietro Ferraro developed Nutella spread using the abundant local Piedmont hazelnuts. Similarly, the Swiss company Camille Bloch created its popular Ragusa line, replacing unattainable chocolate with hazelnuts. Cadbury Dairy Milk, which depended heavily on fresh milk, could not be produced during the war, so the company substituted powdered milk in what came to be called ration chocolate. Home recipes were modified to accommodate chocolate shortages. To satisfy government orders for chocolate in wartime, companies helped each other. For instance, Nestle's would produce a bar for Cadbury, or Cadbury would produce a Nestle's project. As Jana Gur, chief editor of Israel's Al Shulchan on the Table, the Israeli Gastronomic Monthly, explains, Israelis love chocolate with a distinct love for milk chocolate. Most Israeli chocolate experts were trained in Belgium. At one time, Elite, licensed with Swiss companies Mastrani and Camille Bloch. Only one small Israeli chocolate company, Holy Cacao, currently roasts beans for their various bars. For Israelis, local chocolate rates over imported chocolate, and chocolate remains the most popular of dessert offerings. Between 2003 and 2010, as the Israeli economy improved and chocolate eating in Israel increased about 100%. Climate differences may also explain why Israeli consumption, about 7 pounds per person per year, remains significantly less than that of the Swiss, somewhere around 20 pounds of chocolate per person per year. In Israel, the desert temperatures during the summer make transporting chocolate difficult and may make it less appetizing, while Switzerland's more moderate climate would keep chocolate appealing all year long. Nevertheless, chocolate is an exceptionally hot commodity in Israel, has always been, and may be seen from the theft of 100 tons of chocolate from a factory in Haifa this year. In 2016, Yisrael Kristall celebrated his bar mitzvah at the age of 113. He also celebrated a lifetime of chocolate. Kristall first established a confectionery enterprise in 1920 in Lodz, Poland. Sadly, he lost his wife and 2 children during the Holocaust. After he survived several concentration camps, he returned to Lodz to reestablish his candy business. In 1950, he and his second wife made Aliyah to Israel, where he went to work for the Palada Candy Factory in Haifa. Gradually, he began his own business out of his home, and eventually in 1952 opened the Tsar and Kristall Company. Specialties included mini bottle-shaped chocolate-filled liqueurs. Not only is Kristall the oldest surviving chocolate maker but he also held on to the Guinness World Record for the oldest living man. Most people would agree that chocolate is a divine delicacy. Aztec lore imagines the gods fighting over chocolate, resentful about sharing it with humans. Consider the miracle of chocolate's transformation from a tiny white flower to a seed-filled colorful pod hanging from a tree trunk to a brown bean and then into a drink or edible piece of something. No wonder botanist Linnaeus categorized chocolate as the food of the gods. Religious people supped on this godsend. They have been chocolate traders, purveyors, makers, and retailers. A godly food, miraculous in nature, enjoyed by people of faith throughout time. Chocolate became a primary ingredient in passionate debates over chocolate replicas of gods in the early 21st century. Is it blasphemy or is it art? Chocolate controversies surface in both commercial settings and in the arts. Chocolate figures of Hindu or Buddhist gods, along with Christianity's Jesus, cozy up together on display shelves or web pages, forging a sweet shop interfaith unity. Songwriters, authors, and sculptors seek to replenish souls and uplift spirits with chocolatey gods. Nevertheless, religious indignation often erupts at them. The movie, and I'm not sure how many of you saw this, but the movie Chocolat was based on the 1999 book by Joanne Harris, which exemplifies the tensions between the exoticism of chocolate and religious blasphemy. Vianne Rocher, on the sly north wind to an uptight, came on the sly north wind to an uptight French Catholic town, monitored by a repressed mayor and a harsh priest, where people are expected to know their place. The never married Vianne and her 6-year-old daughter Anouk violate several religious village norms, including not attending church. Defiantly, they open La Chocolateria Maya, chocolate shop, during Lent, a period where many forswear chocolate and other sweets. There, Vianne serves her imported 1,000-year-old Mayan recipe for hot chocolate. She feeds the community love, affection, and reconciliation through cocoa nibs, medicants, and nipples of Venus bonbons. Her chocolates magically restore an alienated married couple, fortify an abused wife, and reunite a grandmother estranged from her grandson. Even the mayor finally succumbs to chocolate joys in orgasmic gluttony. In the end, Vianne defies the north wind to settle permanently in her chocolate transformed town. And just as Jesus healed, Vianne, the wandering outsider, mends the town and herself through curative chocolate. Tom Waits, in 1999, wrote a song, Chocolate Jesus, also whips up chocolate conundrums. Waits imagines that chocolate molded into a Jesus figure satisfies his soul in lieu of church attendance. Chocolate supplants the communion wafer, what he calls an immaculate confection. Since his chocolate Jesus loves him and makes him feel good, he doesn't need to attend Sunday church. Several chocolate artists and chocolate producers actualize chocolate Jesuses based on Waite's words. Jean Fleming heard a voice say, "Don't worry, the gods will take care of you," the chocolate gods, while standing at a hotel room window along with her son's Make-A-Wish trip. She had been worrying about 7-year-old Jordy and the cost of treating his rare cancer. The Caribbean Chocolate Vision launched her chocolate deity business, which indeed paid for all of the hospital bills, and fortunately, Jordy survived. These chocolate artists and purveyors fashion commonality, respect, unity, cooperation, and tolerance for our chocolate palates through their gods. And the one other thing I wanted to talk to you about today in terms of Judaism and chocolate is something that I like to call the ethics of chocolate. It hurt my heart deeply to think about it. They enjoy something I suffered to make. I worked hard for them, but saw no benefit. They're eating my flesh. These words are words from a young man rescued from slavery on an Ivory Coast cocoa plantation, reveal a sinister side to chocolate growing and production. Chocolate stirs up questions of basic ethics and values. Many people, faithful and secularist alike, seek value-based lives. Chocolate is one of the many examples of this. Cocoa industry transgressions, and perhaps those of consumers, knowingly or not, harden the lives of destitute laborers and may also threaten the sustainability of the earth. Biblical sources teach the value of fair wages. They teach the value of ethical treatment for laborers. They teach the value of care for the natural world, as well as the responsibility for others. These are ideas that are not just shared by Judaism, although Judaism brought many of them to the world, they're shared by many religions. This develops into the Jewish idea of something in Hebrew called oshek, oppressive labor. If you want to know the best chocolate you should buy, I suggest that the best chocolate derives from companies that develop fair business practices and from informed consumer purchases that satisfy our chocolate cravings as well as our human and religious values. It's possible to find a chocolate bar that matches our checklist of principles: fair labor, environmentally responsible, and nutritionally sound. Admittedly, these are questions that you could apply to any purchase, but it becomes complicated sometimes with the ethics of chocolate. Global demand for chocolate creates a great disconnect between the standard of living of growers of cocoa beans and that of the manufacturers and consumers of luxury chocolate products. It also obscures the tragic psychological and physical danger endured by children who raise and harvest the cocoa beans needed to satiate the developed world's chocolate addition. The complexities of chocolate ethics both reflect and surpass the challenges of things like coffee and tea. While coffee and tea farmers consume some form of those beverages in their own cultures, many subsistence cocoa bean workers, particularly in West Africa, never taste the final treat of either drinking or eating chocolate. Timothy Walker, writing about the slave labor and chocolate underpinning exports from Portuguese-dominated Brazil, noted, prior to the 1880s, at every stage of Brazilian cacao production, Coerced human labor played a role in the gathering and processing of this valuable commodity, which included indigenous peoples, coerced work of free blacks, mixed race laborers, and European convicts forced to emigrate to Brazil. Novelist Jorge Amado captures the shame of the Brazilian cacao business this way. He says, for cacao was money, cacao was power, cacao was the whole of life. It was not merely something planted in the black sap-giving earth. It was inside themselves, growing within them. It cast over every heart a malignant shade, slaying all good impulses. Today, over 2 million children work in hazardous conditions in cocoa growing regions, according to the findings of the 2019-20 survey research on child labor in West African cocoa growing areas, compiled by Tulane University for the United States Department of Labor. West Africa's Cocoa Board places tight controls on the quality of its beans related to fermentation, size, weight, and flavor, inspecting each shipment twice. Yet it requires no accountability whatsoever regarding the labor that produced those cocoa beans. When cocoa beans hail from West Africa, as does about 2/3 of the world's supply, the chocolate produced by major international conglomerates likely includes dangerous child labor. And while most attention is focused on West African chocolate sources, other areas of the world's cocoa sources still need examining for child slave labor. The Tulane University study for the Department of Labor identifies the 2001 Harkin-Engel Protocol, also known as the Cocoa Protocol, as the framework for eliminating the worst forms of child labor. Initially designed by Senator Tom Harkin and Representative Eliot Engel to implement a child slave-free chocolate certification, the protocol's signers, Guittard, World's Finest, M&M's, Mars, Archer Daniels Midland, Nestle, Hershey, Bloomer, and Barry Callebaut, have pledged most recently to reduce the worst forms of child labor by 70% by the year 2022. Harkin-Engel builds on definitions and pledges advocated by the International Labor Organization's Convention 182. It calls for economic growth and resulting social progress for families, free universal education, and the elimination of child slavery. However, the protocol has not been implemented and deadlines have repeatedly been postponed. Several formal fair trade certification systems identified by logo on each product seeks to establish a minimum price above market value and eliminate dangerous child labor slavery. These include Fair Trade International and Fair Trade USA. They aim to ensure increased gain to farmers and prohibit child labor slavery. Certifiers suspend farmers and companies for certification for falling short of these standards. A formal fair trade certification visible on each packaged chocolate assists a customer in finding chocolate fairness for farmers and for children. A religion's dietary laws may inform our chocolate intake as well. Some Jews may prioritize a kosher label, some Muslims a halal label. Generally, the kosher seal marks that the chocolate facility has been inspected by an appropriately trained rabbi to ensure it has not been contaminated by pork products, shellfish, or their derivatives. The kosher label identifies whether the chocolate may be eaten with dairy meals or meat meals, and some producers kosher certify some of their products. Other companies kosher certify every product. Cleaning the chocolate line with water is required for the purpose of certification for Passover or for switching from dairy chocolate to non-dairy chocolate. It gets tricky because water doesn't mix very well with chocolate. Water residue in the line can ruin the chocolate. And while there are some new kosher approaches concerned with worker justice and protection of animals, this traditional certification or hechsher of chocolate does not guarantee its ethical standards. So you see, the history of chocolate is one that's fraught with opportunities, fraught with freedom, fraught with a good way of helping Jews throughout the world and become regular entrepreneurs within the communities in which they live. And yet, even today, we find that there are great difficulties with chocolate, especially the ethics of chocolate. And I would urge you to look for some of those certifications on the chocolate that you purchase. That's the only way to really know whether they're living up to the agreements that are put forth, which would certainly further the ethics of chocolate and chocolate making. So I hope you haven't finished all of your chocolate. I hope you have some more for later. I hope that eating chocolate during this talk has inspired you a little bit, given you some ideas about learning some more about Sephardic history, Sephardic Jewish history, and not necessarily its connection to chocolate, but learning some more about the Inquisition and conversos and the lives of Iberian Jews in our world back then. If anybody has any questions, you're more than welcome to answer those questions. I see that I've gone a little bit over in time. I hope you were enjoying eating the chocolate and listening to the talk, so that you didn't realize that we're a few minutes over.
Rabbi, I have a question. You said look for something on the packaging.
Yes.
Is that a fair trade certification? Is that it?
It's a fair trade certification. Also, if you look for a kosher certification, one of the certifications is called Fair Trade International, and the other one is called Fair Trade USA.
Okay.
Those are the ones those are the two that get followed up on. And the kosher certification, as well as halal for Muslims, they also get followed up on in terms of the ethics of the production of chocolate. So any of four certifications would certainly be helpful, at least to regulate the